Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator and the publisher and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And I want to welcome everybody today, no matter where you might be viewing from in the world, and whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. What I'd like you to do is go into the comments and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. Not necessarily which platform you're connecting from, but if you're in the United States, you're in Brazil, someplace else in the world, go into the comments and let me know where you're connecting from. And just good morning to Mark and Yuri at Blue Spruce Chocolates in Kittredge, Colorado. Good morning to you both. It's good to see you here again today. Also to let you know that this episode of the Chocolate Life Live, as is every episode of the Chocolate Life Live, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. So if you get a chance, go and become a member while you're here. And we'll talk about it over the course of the hour. But what I want to do today is just jump right into the topic for the day, which is around the concept of woke washing. Let's, as I say, let's jump into it. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there. This is what it is you'll see. And just so that people who might be new here know that for every single one of these live streams, I put together a post. And if you just click on this image here, what you'll do is you'll find that you'll get to the post for today's Chocolate Life Live. And what I do here is I provide the links. So here you can watch it in YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook. All of these resources are there. And then I give an overview of each episode. And so you'll find the background. Why the heck am I doing what it is that I'm doing, right? Further down, when it comes to other resources, if there are topics or URLs which are mentioned during the course of the hour, I will put them here. You also have the opportunity to discuss, create a conversation on the Chocolate Life. But in order to do that, you need to be a member, and you can sign up for free if you're not already a member. It's a pretty easy process. So what I want to do before I jump in, I want to say hello to Alain, who's watching from LinkedIn today. Alain, good to see you here. I'm glad that you could join us today. People who follow me, again, I'm not really expecting anybody to read what it is that they're seeing on the scene there. There's a link to this post. On the post, there's a link to this post on this page. But what I wanted to point out is that this particular post, which is from a couple of weeks ago, actually I take that back, from 5 months ago, it just came to my attention fairly recently, is about Tony's Chocolonely. And people who are familiar with the work that I do know that while I believe that Tony's is just an amazing brand when it comes to marketing. So in terms of CPG, consumer packaged goods marketing, I think they're a fabulous marketing company. However, what I do is I think that there's a huge difference between what they say they are doing and the impact that they're actually making. And this is somebody who calls himself a business leader in CPG strategy, is talking about Tony's as a company. So he's talking about the horrors of illegal child labor, talking about what Tony's mission is, talking about some of the challenges that are associated with it, and what he perceives Tony's solution to be, right? Which is they've constructed an impact-focused sourcing model relying on a couple of principles: supply chain traceabilities and higher cocoa processes. One of the things that they mention, which is fairly one of the things that Kyle mentions here, which is fairly interesting, is that he mentions further on. We'll go through. So boom, right. So there's actually a fairly interesting take here. Understanding, going and talking about who the investors are. Verlinvest. It's important to know that Verlinvest is also one of the largest investors in AB InBev, if not the major investor in AB, private investor in AB InBev. So, when I talk about this, I pushed back almost recently, and then, or when I found out about it, this is 5 months ago. And then one of the things that Kyle says, which is fairly interesting down here, is he says that one of their production facilities, one of Tony's production facilities, closed down in 2022. So one of Tony's production plants did shut down for 7 weeks in mid 2022, and it turns out that this is not a Tony's production facility; it's a Barry Callebaut production facility, which is a bit of the story that he failed to mention when you're talking about here. Now, Ben and Jerry's, some people will know about Ben and Jerry's, but it's important to know that Ben and Jerry's parent is Unilever, one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies in the world. And it's interesting in the sense to me that Tony's has been very good about marketing to a particular brand of customer, but they have not done a good job of convincing other companies to follow them, and that's one of the things that they say that they want to do. So, I responded to this recently. It was sort of top of mind recently, even though the original post was five months ago, when I ran across this press release. And so this is a press release from Tony's Chocolonely in Confectionery News. It's about a month ago. And what was interesting is that when I read it, right, so the subhead here is the Dutch impact company with a mission to make chocolate 100% flavor-free has launched a munchable snack range that it claims ends exploitation in chocolate by ensuring cocoa farmers are paid fairly. So Tony's Chocolonely, which is got a supply chain of 7 cooperatives in 2 countries, is introducing a series of products that it claims in this press release, right, will end exploitation in chocolate. Not just end illegal child labor or end slavery, which is what their goal is. It will end exploitation in chocolate. And what the challenge with this is that you actually go take a look at it, right? They reiterate here that says they'll get a living income, lifting them out of poverty, and ending exploitation in chocolate. But then you actually get down here, right? And what you do is you find out that there's an equivocation. A little further on here that says with Little Bits, which is the name of the product, Little Bits. With Little Bits, let me see if I can make this a little bigger. With Little Bits, fans of Tony's can grab a handful of chocolate and support Tony's mission to make chocolate 100% slave-free with every bite. And so here's my challenge with this particular news release, which is we have a competing claim that it's going to end exploitation and that people can help make chocolate slave free. These are very, very different claims as to what is going to happen. And so one of the things I went to look at is I went to see, okay, is this information, right, actually in the press release? And so the first place I went was to Tony's website, and it turns out that this press release about Little Bits is not on the Tony's website. So we can't find it here. I then went and looked on the internet for it. So this is DuckDuckGo, it's not Google, but I've looked there as well. And what we find is that the #1 hit for Tony's Chocolonely Little Bits is in fact this Confectionery News press release. Then we find a bunch of retail sites where they talk about it. And if you actually go and take a look at the language in each one of these releases on The Grocer and Delish and Talking Retail, they're all UK websites. But it's fairly clear fairly quickly, right? What's happening here is that the language is in whatever materials these companies were sent, and they're reporting the language straight. So they actually haven't done a whole lot of research into what it is that the releases are saying. They've just released that they've received some information from Tony's about these new products, and they're just running with it. However, if you go take a look, you can't find the actual release. So I have no way of knowing actually what the release said. I could only go by what other companies, right, had written about it. And what became clear at taking a look at it is this equivocation, right? There is a munchable snack range that it claims ends exploitation in chocolate, right? And However, we come find out there's an equivocation that says support Tony's mission to make chocolate 100% soy free. And those are very, very different things. So these things are floating about in my mind. I'm thinking about them. I'm wondering about what they mean. When I ran across this really interesting YouTube video, it's a channel called Wisecrack. I'm going to play it. I'm hoping that the audio comes through. I know that I can hear it in my ear, but let me know if you can hear it at your end as well, whether I need to make it louder for you or anything like that. And if you can't hear it, what we'll do is we'll scrub through it, right? But there are some really interesting titles. So I'm going to go play a little bit of it, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. Okay. So um, I hope that you could all hear that and scrub back through. So greenwashing is about a certain form of posturing related to the environment, right? Whereas woke washing is actually focused more specifically at CSR and ESG goals, that companies are looking to take just a more general ethical posture, right? And as they wrap themselves in this cloud of cloud of doing good, right? And okay, so no sound from the video. I'm sorry to hear that. So if people want to go and watch the video, it's hard to know sometimes whether or not these videos will come through. But if you go to the Chocolate Life Live, if you go to the Chocolate Life, you go to this episode, there is in fact a link in the resources section called here Woke Deeper Dumb, and then there are some other links that you'll find, including an article in the Atlantic, which is really, really interesting about um, how capitalism and woke capitalism um, drives drives cancel culture. And so there's some, just trying to wrap some interesting resources around it. Um, and so um, yeah, so thank you to LinkedIn user for saying no sound on the video. So Alan, the text was clear, absolutely, really, really important. And then while I'm saying hello, Nicholas Dano, or Nicola Dano, who believe in Brazil, if I recall correctly, or last time I heard from Nicholas, he was in Brazil. Thank you very, very much for connecting today. And so if we come back through here, um, and we see, so corporations seek a moral justification for their existence. And I think so the morals, so this is the difference between greenwashing and woke washing. So greenwashing has to do with positioning the company with respect specifically to an environmental stance, whereas woke washing is seeking a moral justification for their existence, positioning themselves as saviors of exploitative inequality generating system, right? Um, that they sorry about the jump forward here. I can't do it in smaller increments, but you get the idea here is that woke washing is all about this posturing. And what I'm going to claim, right, is that what Tony's is doing is a poster child example of woke washing, right? That what they're doing is they've got a social mission, right? They're using that social mission as the central basis for their marketing messages, right? And yet, when it comes to an examination of taking a look at the impact that they're actually having on the world, that there is a vast difference between what they claim they are doing in public and what they are actually doing when it comes to chocolate. There, and it's interesting. I mean, if you're people are interested more, there's a fabulous Wikipedia article on woke in general, what woke means, the history of woke, and then also this specific section on woke washing and woke capitalism, which I think the Wisecrack article is talking about in great deal. I want you to think about, read these and think about what you mean when it comes to that. And this came up to an actual press release. So Cision is a press release news service from PR Newswire, as you can see here. And there's this interesting article back from 2019 about reframing the narrative of the cocoa industry. And so what you get when you go take a look at things, this is an example in my mind of woke washing and a deliberate use of language to, I think, mislead people. So big chocolate multinationals buy cocoa on the commodity market without traceability. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, we know that they do that. This non-transparent way of doing business leads to the quiet acceptance, and preservation of inequality and exploitation of extreme poverty, right? Right. So the company, a Dutch impact model, calls on the industry, challenges the industry to follow their open chain model with full traceability of cocoa beans and direct equal business relationships. And so here's right the interesting thing that I think that they're trying to say, right? Which is that for some reason they think that the way they're working, right, actually makes their the farmers that they buy cocoa from, direct and equal with respect to the business relationships that they have, right? And that's, I think, unsupportable. In fact, there's no way that these smallholder cocoa farmers, which are part of these co-ops in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, are in fact equal business partners, and nor will they ever be equal business partners with Tony's Chocolonely or the Cacao, the brokerage and trading company, the licensed buying company in Ghana, which is responsible for sourcing the cocoa. And then one of the things that this article fails to mention, I believe, let's go take a look if they actually do fail to mention it. Yeah, they fail to mention that they're involved in, Rainforest Alliance or FAR, Fair Trade. They don't talk about Fair Trade International, so that's not there. All right, this is also something that was found in this article by Mr. Fitzpatrick. There's actually no mention that Tony's is using a fair trade system in order to be able to provide some of the reporting that they're talking about. So everything that Tony's doing, a lot of what it is that Tony, I don't know that everything is Tony's doing, I don't want to overstate things, but much of what Tony's is doing is overstating their direct involvement and their day-to-day handling. They rely on these on-the-ground partners in order to be able to make sure that what it is that they're doing can be considered quote unquote fair. So when it comes to, for example, developing a living income reference, to develop, how much more that they're going to pay, to find out who in fact is on a day-to-day basis, overlooking and making sure that their remediation work, how to identify exploited children, how do I make sure that how do I remediate those situations where we find illegal labor? These are things that Tony's is not taking 100% responsibility for. They're working with organizations on the ground who are providing them with information. And that information is not necessarily well shared among people. People don't know, for the most part, what this means and what is the actual impact that the company is having. So it says an estimated 1.5 million children are currently working on cocoa farms in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. The number of slave children is supposed to be a smaller number than this. I've said before, I've said again, one is one too many. But if you actually look at Tony's annual report, which you'll find that Tony's is helping around fewer than 10,000 farming families, and that this represents somewhere between 60 and 80,000 people, right? When we look at the entire size of it. So the male head of household, female head of household, and children that there might be. So it's a relatively small number of people that they're involved with, that they buy, 12,000 metric tons. And it's a really, really very, very small amount of money, the impact they're having. And this is after nearly 20 years of the companies being in business. And I think it's 15 years next year when they did, when they really started selling chocolate bars. And so we need to go take a look at this context. So Tony's wraps themselves, as we were talking about from the video that we were talking about, they are wrapping themselves. Let me go back here and see if I can find that headline again. So they're wrapping themselves in this moral justification for their existence. The moral justification for their existence is we want to make sure that what we can do is end slavery. So we want to make the cocoa supply chain 100% slavery free, right? Which is very, very different, as I've said, from ending exploitation in chocolate, right? So this is not happening. They're positioning themselves as saviors, right, of the exploitive inequality generating. I can only bounce back and forth within a couple of seconds in here. But you can see what this positioning is with respect to woke washing. And what we do is we find that companies more and more and more and more are doing this. They're adopting this policy. And one of the challenges that's associated with this is that woke as a term has been appropriated from one culture into another culture, wokeism, and that for the most part, it has been denigrated. So at the same time, these people are using woke washing as a way of making their businesses sound more legit. That what they're doing is we're finding the term itself is being diminished among a very, very large part of the population. And we have this really, really interesting, really, really strange dynamic that's going on. And I'm not exactly, I don't claim to know how it's going to go and play itself out over the course of the next several years. I just, my purpose here with today's live stream is just to bring this up. And what do you think? I mean, are there other examples of woke washing in cocoa and chocolate? Can you think of brands, right, that are wrapping themselves up in this cloak of woke washing to help seek a moral justification for the work that they're doing in general? For me, I could apply this to the entire fair trade movement, whether it's Fair Trade International, Fair Trade USA, or Rainforest Alliance. There is this, to some extent, this overlap between woke washing and greenwashing and what it is that they're doing. And I think one of the challenges that we're going to face here as we see more CSR and ESG goals be codified into law, especially in the EU, that there's going to be more and more of this kind of language being done. We're already having problems, figuring out what in fact is going on. What is the truth? We're requiring that people be much more sophisticated in terms of their understanding of language, and they're able to decode the communications of these companies and they're able to understand what it is that's going on, right? And what do you think? I mean, I'm interested in knowing. Put it in the comments here on the Chocolate Life. What do you think about the concept of woke washing? I see it as a fairly pernicious trend. I think it's not going to be good for anybody. We've already had, more than 20 years. The World Cocoa Foundation has been working for more than 20 years to end illegal labor. It's part of the Harkin-Engel Protocol, and many World Cocoa Foundation members are signatories to the Harkin-Engel Protocol. We find that, initiatives like the International Cocoa Initiative and the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, are they a part of the problem? Do we understand? Are they just making things more complicated and making things more difficult to understand? We have an organization like Be Slavery Free, and Be Slavery Free has their chocolate scorecard. And, this is an example. I've done an entire live stream on these. And I will link to that live stream, deconstructing scorecards. But the challenge here is that you have to really, really understand what the reports say, what the physical report is presenting, and what it's saying, and then have to go and look at the methodology and then understand what it is that they're actually reporting on. So, for example, with the Be Slavery Free Chocolate Scorecard, what they're reporting on is corporate policies. That's what they're talking about. These policies are better than the industry average, sort of met with the industry average, or below the industry average. That's what they're reporting on in 7 or 8 different criteria. They're not actually reporting on the actual impact that these companies are having. They're just reporting on the policies that they're having, the policies that they expound, the policies that they say they claim to embody. And this is a real challenge as we try to affect meaningful change, right? This becomes much more difficult to challenge as the language that is used becomes much more complicated, as the layers, right, of language and the number of actors that are involved become greater. How do we go about, as consumers, um, figuring out what to believe and what not to believe? And I'm looking at this. This is it. Reframing the narrative. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to take the additional narrative and reframe it. And sometimes I think that's good. I mean, I often will talk about reframe the debate. So, for example, I won't go into it because these are political issues, which are necessarily going to be highly impassioned. People are going to have very, very strong political and moral and other kinds of reactions to them, which are beyond what it is you're doing. But man, Tony's breaks with the single story of the poor, powerless, and vulnerable cocoa farmers, right? Within Tony's open chain, everybody is connected. So within the chain, everybody is connected. So if you're from Tony's, I would love to have a demonstration of the open chain. I would love to know exactly what it is that you're reporting, and not necessarily what it is that is publicly available on Tony'sOpenChain.com. Why don't we go there and see? Oh, nope, I can't get there. The page is blocked. Oh, I know why, because they're trying to. I have a VPN, and they're trying to. I'm going to go take a look at this and put the link to this on the post for today's live stream, so that we can go and take a look at those things. Go future forward. So let's go to the Chocolate Life Live and see where things are going on. But what I would need to go do, let's see, they've got the 5 principles, who are the people who are involved in it. And notice that, we've got this same really, really messy visual presentation, which makes things much more difficult to be able to decode, right? So what are the relationships and what does this mean? I will go and take a look. We have the principles that are here. So traceable beans, a higher price, strong farmers, the long term, productivity and quality. I mean, I'll go take a look on this. I'll do a deeper dive on this in a future live stream, right? But the question is how big is this initiative? So how many companies are involved? How many farmers are actually having an impact, and what is that impact? And is the impact among all of the other open chain participants the same or different from what it is that Tony's is reporting? I think is an interesting thing that I don't know that I'll be able to tease out of taking a look at this. There's a video here. I'm not going to play it because we're not going to be able to get the audio from it. So I won't do that. So why, where else does this become important? This notion of reframing the debate, right? Is that this language here, right? We are breaking with the story of the poor, power, and vulnerable cocoa farmers is exactly this wrapping ourselves in ethics, right? As a way of trying to separate ourselves from the rest of the industry. However, when you go and take a look at the partners that Tony's has in their open chain, is you'll find that it's Barry Callebaut. It's Berigny and Simois. Simois is like the largest chocolate processor in France that most people have never heard of before, right? And so the question is, are they in fact using things to perpetuate the status quo or not? And it's an interesting open question to me. And my sense is that we need to dive deeper. And again, if you're from Tony's and you're watching here, let me know. What did you think? I would love to have this conversation with you to understand. I mean, so, when I go back and, I take a look at, for example, this press release that's, put up on Confectionery News. Um, I'm not on Tony's release list. I did not get this information. That may be surprising. It may not be surprising to anybody else. It's not surprising to me that I didn't get this release. I mean, and because I'm not likely to report it out straight, right? I am going to be doing some deep dive into understanding what it is that's going on. But I would love to have that opportunity. I would do an entire live stream just with representatives of Tony's in the Netherlands, Tony's in the UKIE, Tony's in the US, to be able to have a conversation about what it is that they're doing, how they're representing themselves, and what it is that this means. But I think it's really, really important as we in the industry, right, to understand the language that's being used to talk about the industry, because we, especially as small chocolate makers, we as small independent news outlets, are trying to talk about these things. Whatever it is that we're trying to say, our voice is very, very small, very, very tiny, very, very soft in comparison with companies like Tony's and Barry Callebaut and Samoa and Ben and Jerry's, right? So how do we go about and compete in the marketplace of ideas to be able to push back at this, and then to hold ourselves accountable, right? Are we in fact engaged in any of the same kind of misappropriation of language, or talking about, ethics, and sort of wrapping ourselves in this woke washing language? How do we go about avoiding that? It's just a fascinating concept to me, something that's come to the foreground. And I'll talk about an initiative that's coming forward, and that's going to be something that's going on in October. We'll talk about in just a little bit. But in doing this, I got an email from a company, Albrecht and Dill, which is one of the larger cocoa traders out there in the world. And they're talking about their 2022 sustainability report, right? So this is it. I will put a link to it, if I haven't already, on the resource page for today's live stream. So we've got a PDF, and we're coming through, and what we do is we actually look at the sustainability report. We've got this nice little map here, right? Let's get it a little bigger. We've got this nice little map here, and it talks about, how much cocoa they're trading, yay, right? So it's like they did 101,000 metric tons in 2022 overall sales, of which 31,500, so roughly a third, was quote unquote sustainable sales. And my guess is that what they're talking about, and it's not offer, it's not, I don't have to guess it, they actually say it right here. We offer both sustainable source and certified cocoa. So when they talk about sustainable, they talk about any cocoa which is sourced as either fair trade or rainforest alliance. That's what they mean by sustainable, at least at this point in our exploration. You can see the countries that they work in, and some of these countries, many of them do not appear to be cocoa growing countries, which is interesting. I need to go take a look at this map a little closer. It just occurred to me, but we can look at it. All right. Traceable cocoa with or without certification. They talk about their supply chain. So in an origin country, so they buy from a supplier. Sometimes they're a pure trader partner, and logistics partner. Then they have shippers. And so it's not entirely sure what this has to do with a sustainability report. Has taken several steps in its cocoa sustainability journey and has been working with stakeholders and suppliers to keep advancing in this journey. We've learned nothing. Yay, we're working on it. That's all we've learned. They talk about their governance model, right? And there's not a whole lot here. And so who the stakeholders are, the employees, the farmers, their suppliers, government clients, financial institutions. Haven't heard a lot about sustainability. So this is what I mean by policy. They're talking about policy. They actually aren't talking about what it is that they've actually accomplished. So when they say that they're got 31,500 metric tons, more or less, in terms of sustainable cocoa. We have no idea what that means in terms of impact. So what was the average price that they paid at the farm gate? What was the actual local price in the government? They're working in Ghana, so the farm gate price is a discount from whatever the world price is. We have no idea what the exchange rate was the day when the cocoa was purchased. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's no information here that we can say, except the 31,000 metric tons out of, well, so it's 100,000 metric tons out of what, 4.5, 5 million. It's a really, really tiny amount, right? And so even if this were 100% quote unquote sustainable, 100,000 metric tons, it's what we're talking about, just a couple percent of the marketplace. It's not a huge amount, and it's spread all over the world. And what are they actually doing here? So this is why it's important to pay very, very, very close attention to these reports and what they're actually talking about. So they've talked about, our certifications, right? We find it here, and we talk about they care about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 17 UN SDGs, right? That's okay. We'll have to look more closely about what those 7 are. They talk about, so they're working on sustainable cocoa nacional in Ecuador in 2018. They got climate smart cocoa, fair incomes in tree crops. I mean, there are project titles, again, policies, right? There are no specifics. They haven't actually said anything about what they're actually doing. So here are their policy commitments. Yay, they have a policy so they have a code of ethics. Yay, I mean, again, this is just policy. There's no impact here. We don't understand what it is that they're actually doing, right? That material, I mean, take a look at this. It's like, this is important to their business, right? So there's nothing here that we can learn from, right, about what they're doing. Sustainable business management, economic growth, management of legal and regulatory environment. It's like, what are these? This graph, impossible to decode, right, in terms of what it is that's going on, right? And so, all right, so here we have this thing called the GRI, and they talk about the GRI as reported in reference with GIR standards, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the days of the internet. This is the internet generation, right? There is no link to what GRI is, and if you don't know what GRI is, you'd have a problem. You're like, where do I go to find this stuff? There's no. If this is a PDF document, I can put a hypertext link, a live hypertext link in a PDF document. How come there isn't a live link here? And I think that any company that is producing PDF reports in terms of what they're doing is, if they don't actually cite their sources with links to the sources, it's a real problem. Here it is. So we can go to GRI, which is, so this is GRI. I mean, again, I'm sort of really frustrated here because we don't know from the homepage, right, what GRI actually means, except I think, after close advantage, it is in fact stands for Global Reporting Initiative. So this is GRI, is a quote unquote reporting standards. It's an organization that will help you meet their reporting standards. The global leader on impact reporting. So Global Reporting Initiative. So there's a lot of work to go from here, right, to understand what it is that's going on in this world. So hey, just before we do that, before we go on with this, I want to say thanks to Elan for joining us as far as you can. Sorry to hear you have to go. This is archived, so you can come back and join it on the Chocolate Life or LinkedIn or Facebook afterwards at any time that you want to, or YouTube. You can find the link. So come back and finish the rest of it when you can. And also, so I want to say hello from Paul McNamara at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and a farm called Golahun in Sierra Leone. So Paul, thanks for joining us here today. And I appreciate your being here today. So this is an attempt. If I was a general consumer, right? And I was interested in understanding what all this meant. This is impenetrable, right? I don't really understand without an enormous amount of work that needs to be done. This becomes a real interesting challenge in order to figure out how to communicate with the general consumer. The general consumer is going to come to this page. They're going to look about this. They're going to click on this. So what are the standards? And man, that's an enormous amount of work to go through in order to figure this stuff out. How do we make it? How do we make it easy for people, right, to understand what is this going on? How do we make it easier for people to look through the language that's being used and understand what the impact is going to be? Now, and I'll talk about something in a few moments that I think is going to be really interesting in this regard. But what I want to do is point out that, again, if you've followed me at all for the course of the last nearly 2 years, one of the things that I've learned is that the industry doesn't have a good understanding about itself. So I can go to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, of the UN, and I can look up their statistical production database in cocoa and most other soft commodities from the early 1960s until the present day. And I can download all of the cocoa production statistics for every country that reports over the course of the last 40, 50 years. And if I go take a look at those production statistics and I compare them with what ICCO is reporting, and there's very little correlation between those two things, right? And if I then, when I was in Brazil last year giving a talk at Chocolate Xingu about this, and also was talking about it in Ilhéus a little later. What the Brazilian government says is one thing, or the state of Pará or the state of Bahia says are three different things, and that's different from what the National Cocoa Producers Association reports. And so even with one country, we have four different sets of numbers about what it is that's being produced. And we don't know, for example, what the differential is between what was paid, what is reported as being paid, and what the farm gate price is. We can't compare that with what the market price was, either spot market price or the futures market price for any particular day. And we have no idea of how these things relate to, well, if I brought them in London or bought them in New York, and are they denominated, is the transaction denominated in local currency that gets converted into US dollars, or local currency that gets converted into British pounds, or is it local currency that gets converted into euros, and maybe it starts out in US dollars because most cocoa is denominated in US dollars, and then gets reported in euros. How do we go about understanding how exchange rates have an effect on the way these numbers are reported? So I don't believe, right, that we have a good idea about cocoa production statistics, and I don't think we have a good idea about what the economic impact is, right? And it's harder, right, to find the answers to these questions when we get quote unquote sustainability reports that look like this. It's harder to get to, right, these numbers when we're talking about narratives like this, which I believe are woke washing. It's harder to understand what this means. What is the actual impact that's being done? Because we're not actually, it's like, do consumers need to know this? Not necessarily. Would it make sense for consumers to know it? I believe that they would, but the industry needs to know that. And why is that important? Why do I think that's important? And it's because if you don't have a good understanding of what the actual state of the market is, if you don't have a good understanding of exactly how much is being produced, if you don't have a good understanding of exactly what the dollar value is being produced. I mean, we do not know how many craft chocolate makers there are in the world. I was having a conversation earlier this morning, and what's the number in the United States alone? And I'm saying, well, it's, if we were to think about, like, there are 10 craft chocolate makers on average for every state, that would mean there are 500 in the United States. Does that seem about right. Well, it's more than 50. It's less than 5,000 in the United States. So 500 seems to be 400, 500 seems to be a good number when we think about it. There are 4 or 5 in Idaho that I'm aware of. How many are there in Utah or in New York or in California, Washington? I mean, there may not be all that many in Montana, right? But you can say, yeah, I understand. It would, yeah, 400, 500 is a reasonable understanding. But we don't know how many chocolate makers there are, craft chocolate makers there are in the U.S. or around the world. We don't know how much cocoa they purchase, right? We don't know how much chocolate they make. So we don't actually know the economic impact of the craft chocolate industry. We have an idea about the social impact. When companies like Ghirardelli are co-opting the phrase bean to bar, we know that craft chocolate is having an impact on the marketplace. So we understand that impact, but we don't know enough, right? With the lack of understanding of what production is, just in general, not just among craft chocolate makers, with the lack of understanding about what processing is, again, we can't make, we don't have a good understanding of what that means. And ICCO does not apparently care about this. The World Cocoa Federation, a foundation, doesn't apparently care about this because they don't do that kind of reporting. And if you go take a look at the press, um, um, the reporting around this, it's not clear that many people care about it. I mean, and let me know, do you care about this? Do you think it's important that if we're going to make an impact, if we're going to try to change the status quo, if we're going to try to pierce the veil of woke washing, what do we need? And I personally believe that a solid foundation of understanding about these kinds of basic statistics is really, really important, right? And so that's why I'm really, really excited to be able to announce that there's something going on in October. There's an organization that was founded a couple of years ago called International Cocoa Diplomacy, and they are holding in the sort of in October, sort of after the end of Euro Chocolate and before the beginning of the Salon de Chocolat in October. This is going to be in London. They're holding the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum. I've been asked to participate. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get there, but I've been asked to participate. And one of the things that I've been talking about in conversation with the organizer, so this is the Oloni Obadokun Thompson. So he's a king of at the Oni region of Ocean State in Nigeria, who has got a deep family connection into cocoa, stretching back several generations. And in the conversations that I've been having with Oloni, we've been talking about how, in the context of international cocoa diplomacy, so if you want to use diplomacy, right, or the principles of diplomacy as a way to be able to identify and address the future needs of the industry, how do we actually solve these problems, right? So can we provide a framework for doing that? One of the things that's been really, really interesting for me to discuss with them is the notion about, okay, how do we provide a solid foundation of understanding about the statistics that we can use? And I don't actually know that we'll actually ever be able to get straight reporting. But if what we can do is we can get the FAO stats and we get the ICCO stats, and we can get trading data and pricing data going back as far as we can, and we can map that with exchange rate data, and we can also take a look at what inflation data is for different countries. So, when we take a look at cocoa at $4,000 a ton in 2023 dollars, what is that in, terms of price per ton in 1990 dollars? I mean, we think about the price of cocoa as being incredibly high, but when you take a look at it in inflation adjusted context, it's actually incredibly low. The price of cocoa has not kept up with the price of inflation. Right? And what you want to do is I would claim, and this has become a part of the conversations that I have with the Oloni, is that, which is an honorific, is that if we want to be involved, let me go and share the screen. if what we want to do is we want to be involved in this business of diplomacy, again, using diplomacy as a mechanism, right, as a tool for addressing the systemic inequalities that we're faced, and to do it, to do it independently of big chocolate and big cocoa, right? To the extent that it is possible to do so. Looking at the underlying statistics, so understanding what the market is going to be really, really important for us. So I put a link to this organization, International Cocoa Diplomacy. There's a link to it on the post for today's live stream. People who may know, this is Chantal Cody. Chantal, founder of Rococo, has been active in the Grenada Chocolate Company and chocolate, cocoa in the island of Grenada. She owns a farm. This is her husband to the left right there. I believe this is Clive Martyr, who is a member of the Academy of Chocolate. And so it's a really, really interesting group of people who put together, but importantly, the original impetus for putting this together comes from a producing country. So it comes from Nigeria, and it comes from this tribal leader, His Majesty Oloni Obadokun Thompson, who's got a family background, multiple generation in cocoa in Nigeria. I mean, that's where the impetus for this is coming from, which is, in the discussions we have, many things are imposed top down. So for example, we looked at the World Cocoa Foundation, it is a top down, right? We've decided this is good, therefore we're going to try to make these changes on the ground. We have ideas about how things should be done, ICCO, all those kinds of things. But borrowing language from the current political situation here in the United States, working from the middle out and the bottom up, I think is what it is that we're looking to do here, is to provide this framework for diplomacy. And it's going to be a membership organization, but unlike the World Cocoa Foundation, there are going to be individual memberships. So if you are just someone who is passionate about these ideas, you can become a member and participate in all of this. We are going to be looking at finding a bunch of research partners to make this work. In universities where I want to do this in terms of international development and economics departments, not necessarily cocoa research departments in places, just trying to approach the problem, trying to approach the challenge of how do we provide a supporting intellectual framework in order to be able to use diplomacy. So what do we do in terms of making sure that we have an understanding? Because I believe if we don't have, and this, the fundamental aspect of this for me is that it is my belief that we can't make good policy decisions, or it is impossible for governments to make policy decisions. It is impossible for big organizations to make good policy decisions if they're not working with good data. And one of the things that I hope to do as a part of this project is to work to at least help describe what this framework looks like and what data needs to go in there, and how we're going to be able to make it possible to be able to provide to the companies that are interested in making, the companies, the governments, the ministries of agriculture that are interested in making these kinds of policy decisions, to make sure that they're making the policy decisions with the best information that they can possibly get their hands on. And so I'm really, really excited about the possibility of being in London for for the International Cocoa and Chocolate International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum in London, the 24th to the 26th of October. And I'm going to put this image up into the post for today's live stream. So we'll go back there. So here's the post for today's live stream. This image sort of stuck me as, I'm putting a paper bag sort of ostrich-like, and I'm going, don't tell me, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. That's sort of my feeling for, where this image, why I chose the original version of this image, and then I did all this embellishment over the top of it, what I wanted to do. But you have here on the post for today's live stream, You've got the original Tony's press release in Confectionery News. You've got my original response to it on LinkedIn. Then I have this article about reframing the narrative, as well as just examples of things. Here is Kellogg's and what they're doing. Whoops. This is a release that bounces, and sorry about that. It does this all the time. But here we're talking about Kellogg and Giant Foods, right? So they've donated $20,000 in a trailer of nutritious food, right? That sounds really, really good, right? So, but if you look at 115 million meals over 30 years, and you go actually decompose what this actually means, and realize that people are doing this as tax deductions. And if they've been doing this for 30 years, the concept of woke washing has been around for a long, long time. We're bathing ourselves, we're wrapping ourselves in this virtuous, ethical kind of thing, you know. And when we think about it, $20,000 and a trailer for a big company like Kellogg's is a rounding error. Sweepings off the chocolate factory or something like that on a yearly basis. So trying to come through and again understand very, very understand to the best extent that we possibly can what the actual impact is, what the numbers are, what the size of things are, I think is a really, really, really important aspect of making a change. Let's get it from here. All right. So anyway, we've got that. All of these things are here. We have a link to the video that I played earlier, Woke, Deeper Dumb. This interesting article in The Atlantic about how capitalism drives cancel culture. And this video about does, in fact, cancel culture work. This link to the Wiktionary. I'm going to put the links to International Cocoa Diplomacy and to the 2023 conference in this post in the next hour or so. And with that, that's it for today. I want to thank everybody who's been here, who's presented comments, and also want to remind everyone that if you have been I want to remind everybody that this episode, as all episodes of the Chocolate Life Live are, has been sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you are not currently a member, what you can do is you can go click here. It says account because I'm logged in to my account. But if you're not, it'll say join here, or there's a little icon on the bottom here, and it will say the plus sign and join here. That's my little avatar. You can go and click on that button, and there's always a free tier to join. You'll get a monthly newsletter. You will also get an invitation to a monthly AMA call just for free membership. And if you become a supporter, a financial supporter, a premium member, there are perks that you can go find out when you go check that out. And so I want to appreciate everyone who is both a free member and a premium member of the Chocolate Life for sponsoring what it is that I'm doing here. And also to say, if you're watching on YouTube, like the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, The Chocolate Wire, and give the video a thumbs up, share it, right? Put a comment on it. Same thing is true of Facebook and LinkedIn. Just, I rely on everyone to be able to spread the good word for what it is that we're doing here. And so that's what I want to thank everyone about for today. I also want to point out that next Friday is the 1st of September. So the 1st of September is when we're going to be going back, when I'm going to be back to my twice a week schedule. But next Friday, we're going to be talking about the difference between, we're going to talk about propagating cocoa and different ways of propagating cocoa, which I think is really important. It came up in a conversation that I've had, and I think it's not necessarily something that everybody knows a great deal about. And I think it'll be a great topic for conversation. And with that, I want to say thank everybody for joining me here today. Have a great weekend for those of you who are watching live, and have a great day otherwise. And remember, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, and sometimes I wonder, do you think I'm actually having fun? I am. I have an enormous amount of fun. This gives me a great deal of personal satisfaction that I interpret as a joy and fun. But if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time.